Little friend. The leaves look somewhat poison ivy-like, so, you know, be careful. Coat mossy boulders, and that's about the only place you find it. So that's kind of the state of the woods right now. Alright, I'm heading out to do some botanizing, so come along with me. I'm at an undisclosed location in the upper Midwest. This is kind of a ridgetop. It's a pretty hilly area, and up here is a former farmland, pretty degraded habitat. There's been a lot of restoration work, it seems like. You can see all these oak trees over here. These are part of a planting, and the way I can tell that is because they're in very neat rows. So they must have been planted with a row planter of some sort. But yeah, all oak trees, pretty densely planted. Oak trees are the most important wildlife plant up here in the upper Midwest, and that's true of a lot of places, a lot of regions. Not only do they provide acorns, as a food source for various small mammals, but they also are a host species, meaning there are hundreds of caterpillar species that will feed on various types of oaks. And caterpillars, especially, and other insects are sort of the foundation of the food web. Agencies will plant oak trees because they are super important. So I'm just going to take a look around and see what else I can find. I haven't explored this area much, but we'll go from this area, which is kind of degraded and has a lot of weedy and invasive species, to a little more high quality woodland down in the valley. So this is a pretty gnarly plant I want to show you. Let's get a close-up look of why it's gnarly. These are the thorns. And this tree is called honey locust, Gladitia tricanthos. Tri meaning three, canthos meaning, I don't know, thorns or something. I don't know Latin. But this tree is especially not fun to encounter because the thorns will grow all along the trunk as well as along the branches. This is a native tree. It is a legume, Fabaceae family. You can see, if you weren't sure, here's the large pod, which is common in the bean family. It's nice to use as like a little rattle. You do see it planted all over cities, but that is a thornless variety. Gladitia tricanthos variety inermis, which means thornless. The natural form of it is thorned, and it's a nuisance, especially because it can grow really over much of the country, especially the eastern half of the country, and down into the south. And it's a very tough tree, and for obvious reasons, unpleasant for animals to encounter, including humans. Here's another plant you might be familiar with. This is Queen Anne's lace, which is invasive, but pretty widespread. It's everywhere. Definitely a problem in prairie ecosystems, prairie restorations, places like that. And it grows in weedy spots. It's in the carrot family, Apiaceae, and in fact it is a carrot. I don't know if you've ever dug one up, but this root is a carrot. It's sort of the wild form of carrot. And if you crack this open, it will have a strong carrot smell. Wish we had smell-o-vision here, but it is white, but not orange, because the orange carrot was bred by humans to be orange. I believe the wild forms are white and purple, maybe, or maybe just white. But that's Queen Anne's lace. Here's another invasive plant up here. This is a pretty bad one too, especially if you like walking through the woods. This is, maybe you can tell, it is a rose. It has thorns, specifically curved thorns. And this is called Multiflora rose, which is Rosa multiflora. Multiflora because rather than forming sort of a single large rose hip from an inflorescence, it will form this larger inflorescence with a bunch of fruits on it. of smaller rose hips. This grows as a shrub that kind of sends these long shoots out, and sometimes they can be 8-10 feet long, and it kind of cascades downward. If you're trying to walk through a woodland full of these, they just kind of crisscross their way into this thicket, and these hooked thorns will just absolutely catch all of your clothing and rip it to shreds, and also your skin. So not only is this invasive and really produces a lot of shade that prevents native trees and shrubs and herbaceous plants from growing underneath, it also is really unpleasant to interact with. You can see this one's about 7 feet tall, and it reseeds prolifically. You can tell there's a ton of fruit on here. A good way to manage these, I think, is by burning. So when woodlands are burned, this tree is susceptible to fire, though I don't know that would kill it completely. It would at least wipe a lot of the shoots out. But this stuff's everywhere. I've seen it at almost every woods I go to, unless it's like really a pristine woodland or is actively managed, which is kind of the case for woodlands in general nowadays in the eastern United States, unless they are in a fairly remote area that never got all of these invasives. It's easy to walk in the woods and think, oh, look at all these plants. The woods is doing fine, but once you start to recognize the plants, you will realize that so much of our woodlands are totally overrun with invasive plants that are crowding out a lot of the natives, especially places that are disturbed like this woodland. Oh look, I'm being visited by a little friend. It's either, I think, a comma or a question mark. I never know which one. I don't know how to distinguish them at the moment, but I forget the genus. Native butterfly? I don't know why it's visiting me. I'm not wearing colorful colors. So it's late September here. It's been a pretty mild fall, I would say. It's 70s, 80s. Most trees have not started losing leaves, or they're just starting to turn a little bit of yellow. But one tree that has kind of a different approach is black walnut, Juglans nigra. And it loses its leaves every year based on day length. So it'll usually be early to mid-September. The leaves start turning early September, and they're off kind of by late September. And that's kind of a more conservative strategy by this tree, because in years where you have an early frost, all of the energy that's still in all those green leaves and all these trees, say you got a frost like September 25th or something, all of that energy is lost. That didn't get pulled back down from the roots, pulled back down into the root system from the leaves. The reason that you see fall color in trees is because they're sort of deconstructing all of their chlorophyll and sugar reserves and sending it down into the roots for storage over the winter, which also acts as antifreeze, really concentrated sugars. It helps the tree survive cold temperatures. But walnut trees, just based on day length, no matter what, even if it's really warm, they will just start turning yellow early to mid-September, kind of just in case there's an early frost. In years where there isn't an early frost, like this year, it seems like it's going to stay warm, 70s and 80s into October. It's not as good of a strategy because this tree now has... Oh, there's a pelican. This tree isn't photosynthesizing, and it's missing out on several weeks of photosynthesis that all these other trees are getting, so it kind of depends. Here's a cool native plant. Leaves are mostly gone at this point, but this is, I believe, Agastache or Agastache, however you want to pronounce it. Agastache nepetoides, also known as giant yellow hyssop. But nepetoides, if you ever hear the scientific name, the second part's called the epithet. If you ever hear something that says oides, that means it looks like and nepa, or nepeta, is the name of catnip. So this plant has leaves that look like catnip. Let me see if I can find any left. As you can see, this has square stems. Members of the mint family, I think, almost always have square stems. As they get larger down here at the bottom, the stem gets larger. Pretty square. Good identifier, Lamiaceae mint family. Alright, I did find one of the hyssops that still has leaves, and I can verify they do look like catnip. The jagged edge, serrated edge. Anytime you see an agastache, they all have these really upright flowers, inflorescences. They can be sort of difficult to distinguish, but it's a good idea to smell them. They all have different smells. This one does not have a pronounced smell, but the other two species, Scrophularia folia, which is the white hyssop, or purple or white giant hyssop, it's also called. The names are confusing. That one has a distinctive kind of spicy smell. And then anise hyssop, which is Agastache funiculum, smells like anise, licorice. This one you can tell the flowers and sort of once the petals drop, it has this really sort of cool lime green color to it. All of them turn this brown when the seeds are ripe. But this one is kind of lime green, which is unusual for flowers. Usually they're a little more colorful. And then Scrophularia folia is kind of pale purple to white. And then anise hyssop is dark purple. So that'd be how to distinguish the three native agastache. And this is cool. I just saw some native lobelia here. This is blue lobelia, Lobelia syphilitica. Love the flower structure on this. This is a favorite of a lot of pollinators. Bumblebees will kind of climb into this chamber. And you see their little bumblebee butt sticking out. Also used by hummingbirds. Close relative, also in the same genus, is Lobelia cardinalis, cardinal flower, which has a bright red flower. That is probably hummingbird's favorite, at least in this region. Good native plant to plant in your yard. Okay, we're gonna head down from up on the ridgetop down into this valley. You might call it a gully in a really eroded environment like the Southwest. You might call it a canyon or something. It is steep. You can follow these drainage areas. When you first get started in going out botanizing, it's good to look for sort of edge habitats, edge environments, where the forest meets a prairie, meets an opening, or sort of a regular sloped dry mesic forest meets the relatively much wetter area where water drains. That's where you're going to find interesting plants, sort of in those transition areas between different environments. You can find cool plants in all the areas, but when you're first getting started, that's if you want to find different things, look for all these little micro differences between the terrain. So right here there's sort of two creek area, steep drainage areas meeting. So down there it's going to be relatively much wetter than it is along any of the hillside here. So if we can get down there without falling, twisting an ankle, we can see what's down there. Here's a big old shagbark. This is a cool plant I love seeing. Grows in sort of rich, moist areas along hillsides. This is Adiantum pedatum, which is a northern maidenhair fern. You might have heard of maidenhair fern in the houseplant trade. I believe that's a different species. But this is our native maidenhair fern. Really beautiful leaves, dark stem. Yeah, they'll sort of grow along hillsides often and cascade downward. There's a bunch over here. A lot of fungi like to associate with oak trees. And this one is known to be a real delicious one. This looks like maitake, also known as hen of the woods. A few good pieces. Pretty fresh. There's a little bit of, those are spores on the top. Might be good to eat. It's a solid pound or more. And it does appear to be growing on a very large Quercus alba white oak. You can look for white oak because they do have pretty pale whitish bark. A few spiders along for the ride, but I might take this one with me here. Here's an example of a monster grapevine. I'm guessing this is Vitis riparia, which is a native grape. It's called riverbank grape. There are other native grapes too. I don't really know if it could be another one. This one's the most common, but like the diameter on this thing, like 5-6 inches almost. Whew. Especially at the base here, yeah. These things, I mean, you really can, if they're securely anchored in the tree, you can swing on them through the trees. Look, it's going way up here. And of course, what tree is it growing on? It appears to be an ash tree, which if we follow down, it's right here. Yeah, it's got a big crack in the bark, so that tree is completely dead. And really, this same grapevine is growing all over this area. I mean, from that tree all the way down here, this direction, they can get massive if they find a nice opening in the forest, which ash trees dying is really giving them lots of those openings. Here are the leaves on that. This is another native goldenrod. This is Solidago flexicalis, also called zigzag goldenrod because of the way that these stems grow. Sort of go up to the left and then to the right, back and forth. This is a really late season flowering plant, like a lot of the goldenrods. It's late September here, still flowering. Found a nice little opening in the forest, benefiting from a large tree falling down. These are crucial nectar plants for bees, migrating monarchs, other butterflies, and moths. Alright, well, I just tried to wade through waist-high raspberry, multiflora, rose, and poison ivy, and that did not seem like the good way to go. Oh, some sort of weird aphid. What are you? Seems to be on a smilax species, which is our greenbrier, also known as carrion flower. Ooh, but I haven't seen these before, and some of them are moving a little bit. Some sort of woolly aphid, maybe? I don't know. Whoa. What is this parasitoid? There's a cool wasp. Right here. Come here, buddy. Possibly an ichneumon wasp? Ichneumon family? Parasitizing something around here. I don't think I've ever seen that one. Really cool white and black antenna. Not afraid of it stinging me because I think all it has is an ovipositor, not an actual stinger. That's my guess. Alright, I've slogged through all the poison ivy. Here's black elderberry, Sambucus or Sambucus canadensis. One of our 2 native elderberries, the other being red elderberry, Sambucus racemosa, which has raceme flowers rather than these umbel-like flowers. It also has red berries. It also flowers in the spring rather than like a little later in the season. But both are important native plants. I believe both of them have fairly hollow stem. So when these twigs die back, which you can see there's some dead ones from the previous season over here. When those twigs die back, they're pretty hollow. And when they break open, it allows native bees to access them and nest in the cavities of those stems. It's like perfect size for a lot of native bees. So this is an important plant. If you want, it's a pretty big shrub, but if you want it in your yard, you got a big spot for it. It likes wet, but it can handle a lot of situations. It's a good one to plant. You can eat the berries. I believe they need to be cooked into like a syrup or something. Maybe not advisable to eat them raw, but you know, look it up. They do have kind of a medicinal taste, which I kind of like when they're cooked. But all right, here's pale jewelweed, Impatiens pallida. Has exploding seeds when they're ripe, so let's see if they explode. Let's try that at full speed. Boing. Alright, here's a plant I always like to see. It's good to, when you're down in areas with exposed rock, to look along mossy rocks to see if you see anything cool, because that's its own little environment. And this is one called walking fern, and look how long this leaf is. Asplenium rhizophyllum, I think is the name. And this will sort of like grow down and coat mossy boulders, and that's about the only place you find it from my experience. Pretty cool looking. This is another plant I like to look for when I'm in sort of wet drainage areas, gullies, creeks. This is somewhat uncommon, and boy did somebody doom it with such an unpleasant name, but this is bladdernut. And this one you can tell, the leaves look somewhat poison ivy-like, so, you know, be careful. They are shiny and stuff. But this one, unlike poison ivy, is opposite branching, opposite buds. And it has pretty large buds. And another distinctive feature is the terminal buds. There are 2 of them. And this grows sort of, I think rhizomatically along, often steep areas where there's plenty of moisture to suck up. And it kind of fills, you can see this is all bladdernut right here. The scientific name of this one is Staphylea trifolia. Trifolia meaning 3-leaved. Another distinctive feature to look for in the winter is it has this really cool like speckled bark. It's often dark, very dark bark compared to a lot of things, but with these white speckles, which I don't know if they're lenticels. But yeah, again, this looks like poison ivy almost, but it is bladdernut. And here's, as the bark gets more mature, some of the dark fills in with more of the white spots. So, yeah. And it glows, you'll see it grow in big clusters. And let's see if we can find a pod. Alright, I found one with some pods. Yeah, bladdernut has these cool pods. They kind of rattle around as they dry out, especially, they'll hang out usually most of the winter. Ow. Inside the pod, there are these brown seeds.